say things that no one in my lifetime has ever said from the right, like this. Watch.
I don't know where there's Jew hatred from the Marxists, the Islamists, the neo-Nazis, the grifters. I don't know where they're pulling us and pushing us. What do they want to do with American Jews? What do they want to do? Where are they taking this country?
At Cox, we're always a step ahead. There you go. I'll show you. Like, before your basement became Movie Central, we made sure you'd have strong Wi-Fi, even down here. And you can rest easy knowing the price of your plan won't go up for 3 years. Guaranteed. See? He's looking out for you, and so are we, with advanced security that blocks threats on your network. Good boy.
They're destroying it. Carlson, Owens, Kelly, Bannon, it is a time for choosing. You pick the good guys or the bad guys. You pit America or you pit the Third Reich. They're not MAGA. They're not conservative. In fact, they're more Marxist, Islamist, America-hating, Jew-hating thugs than anything else. And let me educate them briefly. The Babylonians couldn't kill the Jews. The Persians couldn't kill the Jews. The Romans couldn't kill the Jews. Hitler couldn't kill the Jews, and by this I mean eliminate them. You think your puny little asses are going to be able to do it?
Kill the Jews? Your first thought is, wait a second, how do we get to that? No. Just don't want a regime change war against Russia. By the way, a war in which Jews would die, presumably, both in the U.S. military and the IDF. Like, no, don't want to kill anybody. Actually, that's kind of the point. You want to kill the Jews? So the first thing you notice is like the total inversion of what the argument actually is. It's an argument about to what extent should U.S. military power be used on behalf of another country, not the United States. That's it. That's the debate. And all of a sudden it becomes the Babylonians, the Nazis, trying to kill the Jews. So, again, it's an inversion. He's accusing his opponents of really what he wants, as always.
Well, this Christmas, give the gift of sleep with 8 Sleep. Everybody needs good rest for most of their days, but few know how to actually get it. 8 Sleep's Pod 5 is the answer to that. Pod 5 is a smart mattress that automatically regulates your body temperature throughout the day. From November, the Sleep Award. It's the best. 8sleep.com/Tucker.
The second thing you notice is how totally personal this is. You're members of the Third Reich. You're Nazis. You're evil. You're an Islamist. You hate Jews. You're an anti-Semite. You hate America. Okay. That's ad hominem. There's no even attempt to address the argument that anyone Mark Levin doesn't agree with is making. Instead, it's just attacking them as people. And the third thing you notice is what animates this, which is hate. Mark Levin is filled with hate, obviously. And hate is one of those words that is thrown around a lot as a weapon. You're filled with hate. That's hate. It's hate speech. Therefore, you can't say it, etc. But that doesn't mean, just because the word itself is used cynically, that the term doesn't describe anything or that hate isn't real. Hate is absolutely real. Hate is absolutely real. And if you listen to enough Mark Levin, here goes. You yourself can become hateful. Reacting against it can turn you into what he claims you are. And that's just a fact of human nature. You stick your face right up against this, after a while, you will become hateful. All of us, even people who are committed to not being. It happened to me last week.
You remember
last
the
week, a week ago tonight. I'm sitting on stage with Megyn Kelly and I think Dick Cheney had died that day. And Dick Cheney obviously had died, and it's screwed Dick Cheney, but I'm not going to criticize anybody that he dies. Yeah, it's not reverence for death. But I had a lot of emotion on the topic, and so I said nice words about Dick Cheney's good or whatever. And then I started thinking of his daughter, Liz Cheney, whom I also know and have disliked intensely for quite some time, because she slandered me and because I think she is a violence espouser, and I disagree with that, and I have contempt for it. But rather than say that, I just attacked in a vicious way Liz Cheney. And I said something awful about Liz Cheney, actually. Didn't explain why I was mad at Liz Cheney. I just slandered Liz Cheney, basically. And I said that her father would be ashamed of her, and if I had a daughter like that, I'd probably kill myself. Just an awful thing to say. It's kind of hard to believe I said that. But in my mind, I was thinking, of all the people I dislike, Liz Cheney would probably be at the top of the list. And so therefore, because I dislike her personally, because I know her personally, and because I so disagree with everything about her political views, I'm the opposite of Liz Cheney. If you were to graph it out, I'd be on one side, Liz Cheney on the other. Because we disagree so profoundly, I told myself, clearly I must have told myself, that you can say anything you want about Liz Cheney. She's not really human. You can say anything you want, including something really awful and nasty, like, if I was her dad, I would kill myself. Who thinks like that? Who talks like that? Well, I did. And so I just want to say I'm sorry to Liz Cheney, and I mean that, too. I mean that. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry I said that. I will not stop disagreeing with Liz Cheney until she changes her views. I hope that she does. But there is never an excuse to talk about people like that. And that kind of is the trap here. Mark Levin is almost 70 years old. No one's going to eat the dog food here, okay? That is not a message anyone's going to buy. So the fear is not that Mark Levin will take over American politics. That's not going to happen. The fear is that we become Mark Levin. By staring at Mark Levin too much, we become him. Another way of putting it is, the fight is not against Mark Levin and the many Mark Levins out there, the screamers, the slanderers, the impugners of character, the liars. The real fight is within ourselves. The real fight is against our own nature, our own natural inclination to, in the face of Mark Levin, become Mark Levin. And the cost is to us. You hurt yourself. Don't become evil. Because what's the point? What is the point? And the only way to prevent yourself from becoming that person is by admitting that you've acted like that person and apologizing for it sincerely, not in a fake way. Oh, I'm sorry if you didn't like it. No, I'm sorry, because that's wrong. And it's exactly what I don't like about someone else, and I don't like it about myself when I do it. I'm going to try not to do it again. And of course I will do it. Probably by the end of the show, I'll do it again, because I'm prone to that, because I get mad. But we need to say every single time we do that, no, I'm sorry I did that, and I'll try my best not to do it again. So really, just to keep in mind, as things heat up, don't become the people you despise, or else what's the point? We wind up, the Second World War is that story. We're fighting for freedom, but we're arming Joseph Stalin to do it. Really, we sent more money and airplanes and tanks and jeeps and boots and food to Joseph Stalin, the greatest mass murderer in history, in order to bring what? Freedom to the world? It's not a defense of Hitler, of course. But that's shameful. The Roosevelt administration did that with the full support of his party. It's like, don't become the thing that you hate. That's it. And if you don't do that, if you allow yourself to get carried away, so mad that you start mimicking the hate that's coming at you, what happens? Well, of course, it flowers into violence. Like, that's inevitable. We're very close to that now. In fact, we're there in some ways. It's happened. We're still talking about a political assassination, a friend's political assassination on September 10th. Charlie Kirk was murdered because of this. So it can happen, and it will happen unless all of us prevent ourselves from becoming that. By the way, you can't control other people. All you can do is control your own behavior. So if you act like that, apologize for it, and you're really trying to do that. But we are absolutely moving toward violence, and it should be really clear. That's the other thing, is you don't want to espouse violence, because where does it go? It always begets more violence, 100% of the time. September 11th led to millions of deaths in the Middle East. Yeah. October 7th led to Gaza. But this all, once the violence begins, you can't predict its course, but you can be fairly certain it will accelerate. And when that happens, all calculations change, and people change. And the feud becomes irresolvable, and more people die. And that could happen in our country. So the only way to stop it is by controlling your own behavior, so you yourself don't become evil. So Mark Levin is already there. And we know that because Mark Levin has repeatedly, and he's not the only one, but he's the most blunt, has repeatedly called for just murdering civilians, children in Gaza because they're Amalek or whatever. They're stained by blood guilt. Prime Minister of Israel said exactly the same thing. They are guilty by virtue of how they were born. So that, by definition, includes women and children. So Mark Levin is not clever enough to keep the implications of these views to himself, and he said them repeatedly on television, just to give you a sense about how Mark Levin feels about human life and the human soul. Watch this.
And I'm supposed to, what? Shed crocodile tears for what's going to happen to these people? I'm not. Maybe I'm the only one who will voice it, but I'm not.
Make Thanksgiving unforgettable this year with inspiring designs from Living Spaces. Create a warm, inviting atmosphere.
Israel has every right to throw every damn thing it has at barbarians. And if there are innocent people, quote-unquote civilians, who are killed, then maybe they ought to organize to take out the government they elected. Tapper and the others are saying there's 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. They're not all terrorists. They don't all believe in Hamas. They really have no choice. Let me ask you a question. Is that how we treated the German people when we were fighting the Third Reich? Well, they're not all Nazis. I mean, you got to fight to win and survive. You can't sit there and figure all that stuff out. Oh, but don't hurt the civilians. Look, we have to defend ourselves. The Israelis have to defend ourselves. The free world has to defend itself. And if there's collateral damage, well, that's too bad.
25 years ago in this country, people didn't talk that way. They didn't. It was a different landscape, different expectations. The idea of blood guilt, because that's what he's describing there, you should be killed by virtue of who your parents are, who your grandparents were, by virtue of how you were born. You should be killed. You don't have a right to live. You're guilty because you were born, and which, of course, leads to collective punishment and genocide. That's the basis of genocide, right there, that attitude. That was considered totally un-Christian and un-American because it is. And if someone said something like that on television, I mean, he'd be probably pulled off the air for that. You should kill kids because you don't like their parents? That is their attitude. That's the Israeli government's attitude. Well-documented attitude. We're paying for that. And you could say, well, you know, you don't have to hate Israel, but that behavior is not better than Hamas at all. In fact, it's kind of the same, right? Killed civilians. They came in and killed people at a music festival. Bibi, turns out, let them in. We found out today in the Knesset. But whatever you think of what happened on October 7th, you know, Israeli civilians were killed. That's terrible. We're against that. We have to be against that, and we're no better than the people we're fighting, of course. What is the difference between us and them? We're in different groups? That's not a meaningful difference. The difference is we're committed to a set of Western principles, and those principles begin with we reject blood guilt. And because we do, we reject collective punishment and genocide. A lot of us thought that was a consensus after World War II. That was the lesson of the Nazi regime. Should have been the lesson of the Soviet regime, which, of course, practiced collective punishment and committed genocide against Christians. Most people don't even know that. It did more efficiently than the Nazis did, but all of it is terrible. All of it is awful. And a lot of us thought that was the main lesson that we were supposed to take away from the war. And by the way, that's a great lesson. That's an excellent lesson. We should take that lesson from the Second World War. And then you wake up and there's Mark Levin, not just Mark Levin, but our policymakers, our members of Congress. Most of them are not Jewish, by the way. This like infected everybody. That's okay? It's not okay. It'll never be okay. It's a shame. It's shameful behavior. It's a stain on this country. You can't fight people unless you think you're morally superior to them. You shouldn't be. And how can you say you're morally superior if you're operating from the same assumption, which is that everyone on the other side should be killed because of how they were born? But that is absolutely Mark Levin's assumption. And he said it out loud. Look at this Twitter exchange. Watch this. she's basically saying, I don't understand like why we're getting involved in all this stuff. And Mark Levin is saying, well, you're a Nazi. And someone writes in and says, Mark, I'm not even, I may be on your side or not, but what you're saying is actually creating anti-Semitism. And he's saying, and I'm quoting, anti-Semitism is, quote, in your family's DNA. Who thinks that? Who would say something like that?
Streaming November 16th on Paramount Plus, it is the return of Landman. A prod to the co-creator of Yellowstone, this show's television's biggest phenomenon, and for good reason. Academy Award winner Billy Bob Thornton is back as Tommy Norris and managing higher stakes than ever before, featuring a loaded cast, including Academy Award nominees Demi Moore, Andy Garcia, Sam Elliott. Landman is pretty exciting for a TV show, honestly. In the wake of his former boss's passing, tensions come to a head as Tommy and Demi Moore's Cammie Miller struggle to maintain control of MTEX Oil, the company at the center of the drama. And with his father coming back into his life, Tommy must juggle both his role as an oil man and a family man as worlds collide. A familiar story, but never better told than in this hit series. A lot of people are watching this, and for good reason. Landman, new season streaming November 16th, only on Paramount Plus.
Guilt or virtue are not in your DNA. We don't believe in a chosen people, and we don't believe in a damned people. Period. We don't believe that in the West. We don't believe that some peoples are inherently better or worse than other peoples. We believe in individuals in the capacity of every person to make individual choices and change for the better or the worse. And on that basis, they are judged. But not on how they were born. And if we don't believe that, if we think that some people are just inherently bad because of their DNA, as Mark has said, and a lot of other people like Mark have said, then what's the point of all? What's the point of all of this? At that point, it's just like, well, my group has more guns than your group, and we're in charge. That attitude gets people killed, and it rots your soul. That's why we say anti-Semitism is bad in the first place, isn't it? You can't judge a whole group of people by how they were born, by their genetics, by their DNA. But there's Mark Levin doing it. So it shouldn't surprise you that, of course, if you have those attitudes and you think there are Americans, and he clearly does, whose DNA makes them less than human, unsalvageable, inherently evil, well, it shouldn't surprise you that he'd be calling for violence against them, and he is. And this isn't like your kind of classic, like, oh, everyone's out to kill me, I'm so important. I despise that. But it's a fact, and we know that from what he says. So here's Mark Levin about 2 weeks, in fact, I think exactly 2 weeks after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and he was trying to explain how this happened. How did Charlie get killed? Here's what he said.
The call to violence, that's what it is. You're calling people Hitler, it's a mass murder. You're treating ICE like it's the Gestapo or the SS. Then you're free to shoot them.
There you go. You call people Hitler, they get killed, right? You torque up the rhetoric to, we've all decided Hitler is the worst. Okay, great. Hitler's bad, for sure. So once you call people that, you liken them to the person we collectively agree is the worst person ever, person we collectively agree if you had a chance to kill baby Hitler, you would. Then why wouldn't you kill the people who are Hitler in your own society? Well, you probably would, and you'd feel justified in doing it. And that was the point he was making. Yeah, fair point. You hope it's not used to censor people. You're allowed to have ugly thoughts. By the way, they're constitutionally protected. But you should be discouraged from it, for sure. And as Mark Levin just said, they lead to violence. Calling people Hitler leads to violence. Wow. Well, since that's his description in his terms, consider this clip about a month later.
I would ask some of these people who say, look, I'm going to stand by Tucker. He's just inquisitive. He likes to have these people on.
Life can be chaotic. Gettle's HVAC and plumbing experts can help. Our rejuvenation maintenance services improves your home's efficiency, fixing tomorrow's unexpected breakdowns today. Keep your busy home running safely and comfortably with Gettle. We do things the right way, not the easy way.
I'm going to ask them questions, really? But I'm not going to prep for them, no. So Tucker is a racist. Is that okay? First of all, how many of you have friends who are racists? Isn't that a fair question, Mr. Producer? How many of you have friends who are racists and are proud of it and talk about it on a national platform? This is what I get now. Will you debate him? Will you debate Tucker Carlson? I don't debate the Klan. I don't debate Nazis.
I don't debate Nazis. He texted me that.
Pure Talk customers are proud of their wireless company. Think about that. You never hear anyone. This is hurt. Pure and switch to America's wireless company, Pure Talk.
Almost didn't want to address this because you never want to make anything about yourself. It's another way in which you can very easily become Mark Levin, start talking about yourself all the time. Your family, your people. No. If you're interested in improving the country, you should be talking about all people in the country. It's not just about you or your people, whoever they are. It should be about everybody. That's the universalist spirit without which this country can't continue, just to be clear. It'll break apart, of course, into warring groups. But the basis of racism and anti-Semitism and all forms of bias that we abhor, forms of bias that treat people as members of groups rather than individuals, all emanate from the same idea, which is you're born a certain way and you can't be fixed. You have blood guilt. And that's why it's bad to call people Nazis. And here is Mark Levin calling people Nazis. Well, in this case, me. So what is that? Well, it's, of course, a call to violence. And it's not just me. We compiled a list of all of some of the people on Twitter Mark Levin has referred to. These are all recent. Nazi, Nazi, Nazi bastard. F off, Nazi, 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 Nazi. But finally, somebody writes in on Twitter and says, and we're quoting, "This is Mark Levin's 12th post today that's related to Israel or its critics. I know he's Jewish and sympathy for Israel is understandable, but this now borders on obsession." To which Mark Levin responds, "Nazi!" Nazi. You should pause before you call people names like that. And I should just say, because righteousness is a goal, self-righteousness is a sin, I don't want to be self-righteous. I've certainly called people things they didn't deserve. I've leveled ad hominem attacks on people. I did against Liz Cheney. I apologize for it. I meant it. But we shouldn't let ourselves go in this area. We should force ourselves to treat other people like human beings with sincere disagreements or insincere disagreements, but still agreements that we can debate. Because once we start calling people Nazis, we really have no choice but to start shooting them. To be Dietrich Bonhoeffer and sort of reach the end of reason or even Christianity. Bonhoeffer decided Christianity's not even, he was a Lutheran pastor. Christianity's not enough. We have to kill the guy. I'm not judging Bonhoeffer. He was a great man in some ways, but that's inevitable once we decide that people are Nazis. So you kind of have to wonder why they're doing this. And of course, it's because when you call someone a Nazi, and maybe in Mark Levin's case he believes it, you immediately freeze them in the headlights of your slur. Nazi? Nazi? You deter people from arguing with you because no one wants to be called a Nazi. But you also, for the bystanders who aren't even directly part of the debate, you draw their attention away from what the debate is actually about. In other words, for every moment that we're arguing about who is and who is not a Nazi, answer really nobody. The Nazis have been around for 80 years, sorry. But for every moment where they're having that debate, we're not debating the things we ought to be debating. In this case, should we use military force on behalf of a small country, a totally irrelevant country? That's a fair debate. We're not having that debate. We're screaming about who is a Nazi, who's not a Nazi. So I guess the thing that we can learn from Mark Levin in this case is if you have a position, argue that position. Levin doesn't want to argue his position. It's very hard to defend, so he won't defend it. He'll just attack. But the rest of us who have a sincere position about America's relationship with Israel and the damage it has done to the Trump coalition, which we're watching it be destroyed, very unfortunately, those people should argue what they believe and not get caught in this trap of identity politics. Who's a Nazi was a right to speak? Buzz off. No. AIPAC is a foreign lobby. It should register as one. Our country should come first in the thinking of every person who represents our country. Those are the debates that we ought to be having. So the next lesson that we should learn from this contretemps is that you can't allow other people to define your priorities. You are an adult. You are an American. You have the right to decide what matters to you. If you're having trouble paying your health insurance, or if you think divorce laws are unfair in this country, or if you think chemtrails are a problem, if you don't like fluoride in the water, if you think there should be a cap on credit card interest, whatever the issue that matters to you, first and foremost, you have a right to feel that way. No one should be allowed to talk you into adopting their enemies as your own. There are a ton of people in Washington who think the single most dangerous person in the world, most evil person who's ever lived is Vladimir Putin. Some of them really think that. A lot of them are just getting rich by saying it, but a lot of them do believe it, because I know them. I know they feel that way. It's sincere. But as a percentage of the country, what percentage of the country actually puts killing Putin at the top of its priority list? Like less than 1%. It's just not a problem for most Americans. Who runs Russia? But it's a huge problem in Washington. So Washington, for a couple of years there, succeeded in convincing the rest of us to either adopt their priority, Putin is the most important thing, we have to stop Putin, or shut up about it, because if you don't, you're an agent of Putin. Basically bullied the country into accepting their list of priorities. And the election of Trump was really a refutation of that. It was tens of millions of voters saying, no, actually, our problems need a hearing. Someone needs to care about our problems. It's not just about you and your little parochial squabble. They're telling us now that Iran is the biggest problem we've ever had. And if you question that, like how many Americans have been killed on American soil by Iran as compared to the number, I don't know, killed by Mexico, which brings all our fentanyl in, not Venezuela, Mexico, you get attacked as an agent of the mullahs. And the way to think about this is, who cares? Your priorities are every bit as important as Mark Levin's, because you are a co-equal with Mark Levin because you're also an American citizen. He gets one vote, you get one vote. That's our system. So Mark Levin can scream at you all he wants and tell you you must really care about affecting regime change in Iran. It is absolutely okay. In fact, it's your duty to say to Mark Levin, I don't really care. I can't afford my health insurance. Our leaders should solve that problem. And you'll be joined in that by like 150 million other Americans who agree with you, who can't find Iran on a map. They're not pro-Iran. They're not Shiite Muslims. But they have real problems and they want a hearing for those problems. They want someone else to care about those problems. That's okay. And it's interesting because people like Levin and Ben Shapiro, who at one point had this like media empire propped up by Facebook, the Daily Wire, with some good people on it, you know, it's fine. But Ben Shapiro spent, I don't know, a decade posing as someone who actually cared about your concerns as an American. He did it imperfectly. There were flashes that he didn't really care. And he's like, no, I'm a conservative. I'm not just interested in the fortunes of one tiny country in the Middle East with a population of 9 million. No, I have a lot of interests. I really care about this country. I'm against the trans movement or whatever. But increasingly, as everyone's gotten more hysterical and prone to sort of blurting out the truth, that veil has dropped and you can see what Ben Shapiro really, really cares about. So this is a very revealing exchange that took place 6 days ago, last Thursday, on stage with Megyn Kelly. Ben Shapiro was just sitting there being interviewed by Megyn Kelly, and he said something like, Tucker Carlson's, for Maduro, the communist leader of Venezuela, who I guess were on the way to killing or something, forcing out, regime changing him. And he defended Maduro. Didn't, actually. And Megyn Kelly says, well, Tucker said in his show that Maduro, most people didn't know this, whatever his many faults, wouldn't hire him as an economist, okay? But whatever his many faults, has the most socially conservative country probably in the hemisphere. So Venezuela, it's just a fact. I didn't make this up. I'm not in charge of Venezuela. Just noticing that Venezuela has banned pornography, banned abortion, banned gay marriage, banned sex changes, and banned usury. You don't have credit cards with 40% interest in Venezuela. Okay.
When buying a coffee, you want to pay right away. But buying tickets to Paris, that's when you probably...
Ben Shapiro responded this way.
Tucker's made the point, I'm not going to here to be Tucker's defender, but he's made the point that Maduro is culturally conservative.
Who gives a shit? The guy's a communist dictator. Everyone in his country is eating dog. He's shipping fentanyl to the United States to kill Americans. Why do I give a shit whether he's anti-LGBTQ rights?
Who gives a shit? I do. I'm not moving to Venezuela. I'm not pro-Maduro. But I care about that. Why wouldn't I care about that? I've got kids. First of all, I'm against abortion. Sorry, unpopular. I feel that way. I think it's really sad. I would personally become poorer to end abortion, voluntarily become poorer to end abortion in the United States. That's not a choice. Don't want to become poor, but I would because I care about it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're offended that I do, but I care about it. Lots of people care about it. I don't think pornography is good. That really hurts people. You know, I don't think pretending that the sexes are the same is good. And you claimed that you didn't think it was good, but it turns out, quote, I don't give a shit. Maduro's against Israel. Oh, okay. I don't give a shit. Well, you spent like a decade pretending you did give a shit. That you were on the side of like normal Americans who have a mix of concerns. They definitely care about economics and they care about social issues too because they have children and they see where this is going. It's not good. That your economic condition is not the only measure of health. Your spiritual condition matters too. It's just a fact. It does. If you're totally degraded, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's not worth it. It's not worth getting the whole world and losing your soul. Sorry. And most people feel that way, but not Ben Shapiro. He doesn't give a shit. So why the hostility? Well, maybe because if you keep talking about the so-called social issues, which are not limited to abortion and pornography and gay marriage, the trans issue, they get pretty quickly to economics, to usury, to lending money and interest. And most people, including me, are not against lending money and interest, conceptually. But it depends on what interest rate it's being loaned at. So there are payday loans in this country that are 600% annually. 600% interest annually? And who's taking payday loans in this? Well, poor people are. And they're never getting out of it. They're car loans. They're credit card loans. There's private credit. We used to call it loan shark. At exorbitant rates. Rates so high that people will never get out from under them. They're enslaved by it. It's called debt slavery. It's 100% real. That's not an ideological point. It's just an obvious observation. And it was one of the observations that Charlie Kirk was making on a daily basis before he was assassinated, which is interesting. And it's that kids are buying food on credit. Buy now, pay later. That's credit. You're paying interest on that, whether they call it that or not. Late fees. People are loaning you money at a much higher interest rate than, say, rich people are borrowing money. And that's bad because it's really hard to get out of it. And if you're wondering why the average American homebuyer, American-born homebuyer, is almost 40 years old, when the year I graduated from college, it was 28. How did that happen? People are in too much debt. This is probably, if it isolate it in a world with a lot of issues, a lot of pressing issues, debt for young people is probably the number one issue, which is to say, it's the number one thing that is destroying them and making it impossible for them to get married and have children, which Ben Shapiro told us he cared about. And that's the conversation that they absolutely don't want to have. So if you say, well, Maduro, whatever his many faults, probably stole the election. It looks that way to me. I don't know, but it looks that way. People say he's bad. Okay, I believe you. He's bad. But he doesn't have that, and that's a good thing. And Ben Shapiro's like, I don't give a shit. Shut up. He's a communist. It makes you wonder how we're defining communist here. Because, of course, in the United States, communist no longer means someone who believes Marx and Engels. It has nothing to do with academic theory. That's all gone. Communist in the United States is a synonym for someone who seeks to rot a society from within and destroy it. And I guess I would argue that if you don't give a shit about pornography or 63 million abortions in the United States and since Roe v. Wade or whatever, and if you don't care about 600% annual interest rates on payday loans being given to the poor, who's the communist exactly? Who's trying to rot this country from the inside? Who doesn't care about the destruction of human beings in our country?
Pluto TV is your home for premium black entertainment. You bring it on. Check out the Black.
It's not me. You're a communist. So I thought a lot about this. I didn't want, you never want to extrapolate too much from a single clip. You don't want to be cruel to people. You don't want to be unfair. Having been unfair many times, it weighs on me. Don't want to do that. So I kind of looked around. Is this consistent with Ben Shapiro's worldview? Does he think GDP, the aggregate economic activity in a country, the bottom line number, really doesn't tell you that much. But for simple people like Ben, who aren't sophisticated in their understanding of economics, that's important. GDP, GDP, GDP. Never hinting at the things that it doesn't measure. Never hinting at what a distorted number that is, just like the inflation rate or the employment rate. I mean, these are not really real numbers. But is he really a guy who cares about GDP, economic activity, or some people getting rich, more than he cares about the lives of his fellow Americans? Boy, that's a pretty heavy charge. You'd hate to level that against anyone. You'd hate to claim that about anyone. Could this be a guy who really only cares about a foreign country? So we went looking. So first, and famously, don't even put it on the screen because I'm sure you've seen this, there was Ben Shapiro saying, I'd be willing to vote for Bibi Netanyahu for president of the United States if only it were constitutionally allowed. Huh? You want some foreigner to run our country? Who even thinks like that? He said that. Maybe it was just he was getting carried away. He just loves Bibi so much. Loves the guy who is killing tens of thousands of children in Gaza so much that he wants him to run our country. Okay. But then we found a couple of other clips, which are recent, that give a window, not just, and I hate to be mean to poor Ben Shapiro, who's clearly going away as a media force. I hate to be mean to him. But this does reflect the worldview of an awful lot of people in Washington and a lot of people in Ben Shapiro's world. And that worldview is the people of this country don't really matter. They can be replaced. And by the way, if you complain about the fact they're being replaced, which they are, at high speed, it's measurable, then you're a Nazi and you must shut up and be punished. But those people don't really matter. They should do what they're told, and ultimately they should just serve the people who are profiting from all of this. Does he really think that? Well, here are a couple of clips that you can watch carefully and answer the question for yourself. Here's Ben Shapiro.
We have trained an entire generation of people to believe that if their lives are not what they want them to be, it's the fault of systems, as opposed to decisions that are in their own control. And politicians absolutely have a stake in selling that. A lot of people in our industry have a stake in selling that. It makes people feel good about themselves and bad about the world. And the reality is, if you want a better life, you should feel better about the world and worse about yourself. If you're a young person and you can't afford to live here, then maybe you should not live here. I mean, that is a real thing. Yeah, I know that we've now grown up in a society that says that you deserve to live where you grew up, but the reality is that the history of America is almost literally the opposite of that.
It's hard to know where to start with that clip. I think that's been on the internet and people are experiencing gut-level revulsion when they see it, and they really should. And there's so many ways to approach it. There's so many things wrong with those statements. So childish, those statements, so lacking an understanding of people or any connection really to the country at all. But really what you see underneath all of that is contempt for the people who live here. You have no right to live in the town where you were born just because your parents are buried there. Your ancestors built the town. Who do you think you are? Imagine feeling that way about someone in your own country. Imagine having that level of contempt for a fellow American. You don't even know anything about the person. It's young people. They're not entitled to live where they want. They'll live where BlackRock tells them they can live. It's like, whoa. If you had a thought like that, I've had some ugly thoughts. I just admitted having some ugly thoughts. Boy, I would try and push it back and not express it. Ben says it without any embarrassment because he means it. That's exactly right, because he means it. Whew. I don't think that you can win a popular debate with that attitude, because irrespective of the content of your sentence, people can feel the loathing that the speaker has for them. Ben Shapiro just does not care about you at all, is not even pretending to care about you. So again, it really doesn't matter what he's selling. That guy is not going to make the sale if people are free to buy whatever they want. It's like, I don't know what that guy's selling, but he doesn't like me. I can feel it right away. He doesn't care at all about me at all. And he thinks so little of me, he's not even going to, like, put on the dog. He's not even going to, like, try to pretend to care about me. And a guy like that, whew, he really needs censorship and bullying to succeed, because the free market does not reward a man like that at all, ever. Because people don't like it. Why would they like it? Here's another clip that makes basically the same point. It is in some ways even more disgusting, maybe less well known. Here's Ben Shapiro telling you that if you ever want to retire, stop working to pay off your 50 freaking year mortgage. You own the house, really, for 50 years. Okay, no, I'm renting it. I'll be 90 by the time I pay it off, which of course I won't, because I got all kinds of other loans too. So if you complain about that, if you had these dreams of like working really hard and retiring, how dare you? How dare you? Here's Ben Shapiro.
No one in the United States should be retiring at 65 years old. Frankly, I think retirement itself is a stupid idea unless you have some sort of health problem.
The Ring 4, November 22nd. Watch only on DAZN.
I have a plan for Black Friday.
Great, I'd love to hear it.